Introduction to Ecosystems for Game Modeling, 343. During this lesson we will talk about the LOD system for for your world. Now I'd like to show you where we're headed in this lesson before we proceed. Here we have an image plane that we'll be putting in. Some call it Virtual Studio, and that will help us to have a visual representation of what we are going to be modeling. We will set up our Virtual Studio to start with, and then we will continue with the modeling portion. This gray mass is known as a collision model, and it is applied to LODs 1 and 2, the highest resolution LODs within the reset zone of your world, so that if you or your vehicle should collide with that tree, you don't go through it. And typically there's hard and soft collision. Hard collision is, just as it indicates, is a hard surface to bump into. It usually has a sound effect associated with it. Soft collision will play out an animation associated with leaves or bushes, as well as giving you a sound effect also. And that's usually this area around the bushes, around the leafy parts of the ecosystem. Alright, and this lowest LOD actually is a planar surface. And if I turn that around, you can see how flat that is. That is typically seen at a range of 500 feet or more. So if I actually put that at 500 feet, you can get an idea of the distance that we will be seeing that object. Well, you can see it's quite far away, and being flat, one polygon is appropriate for that distance, and a huge savings for poly count budget. Now this LOD number 3, is also an LOD level of detail that is used for beyond reset zones. It is very low poly count, just enough to get the general shape of the object that's utilized in the scene. You don't want to get up close to this, so it is placed beyond the reset zone. So typically we see this LOD from 300 to 500 feet. So if I set that at 300 feet, the closest that we'll ever see that, you can see that it's fine for what we are going to be using it for. The leaves are angular up close, but at this distance you won't really be able to see that they don't have a nice appealing arc like the higher LODs. Now this LOD is typically the LOD that we'll see within closer ranges. It is the farthest LOD for within the reset zone of your world. You still are not going to get close to it. It's seen typically between 100 and 300 feet. So if we put it at 100 feet, you can see the closest range that it will be seen. We'll move these out of the way. So you can see that that quality of images or model is fine for that distance. This LOD1 is the highest LOD for this particular object, and it is seen between 0 or next to the model, next to your game camera, up to about 100 feet. And so it will carry a normal map usually for the trunk area, which is within that range. If you're walking around, you're at about a 6-foot high range typically for the field of view of the camera. And so we want to make sure that our normal maps are only used on those objects that you get close to within the scene. And they're very expensive, but very effective. So we would much rather see a bumpy surface on the trunk of a tree rather than something smooth and glossy. Also, the normal maps are typically not used on anything that's further away. If you can get up next to this tree, but you have to look up in order to see the leaves, it wouldn't be useful to apply that normal map to the leaves. We will go into detail in the PowerPoint lecture so that you can get more of a visual idea of how that works. So the next segment is how to set up the file with the image maps, image planes, as well as your units set up. Alright, we will continue in a moment.